Here's David Rockefeller from his memoir. We are on the verge of a global transformation. We're on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order. Here's another one, speaking in the New York Times about how great Mao Zedong is. Here's a quote out of his memoirs, page 405. Some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. But they're not one world, everybody work together and be friends. They're one world corporate global empire.
It's monetarism. That's monetarism. I say the problem is, the solution is, my experience internationally, and knowing people in other countries, leading circles in other countries, important nations, I know that if the people of the United States would say what they are thinking now, in a large degree, they're thinking that this collection of Republican candidates and this Democratic candidate, Obama, the president, that as long as these people are treated with respect, the American people are going to submit, and they will not fight. And if they will not fight, we're duck soup. And the problem is our politics stinks as a result of 3 generations, effectively, in terms of adults. What happened when Jack Kennedy was killed and we went into the Indochina War. We have never reversed that trend. I
understand. So what about this issue, sir? You talk about provocations. I was noticing that the Israeli papers reported that the folks that ran the Levant affair, blowing up U.S. Movie theaters and things full of U.S. service people in Egypt to try to blame Egypt and start a big war. I noticed they were recently given awards. I know they've had, like I said, that publisher saying, you know, go after the president if he doesn't launch the wars. What about Israel or the British or other groups? We know Israel was created by the big banksters.
Israel as such is not a relevant problem in this case. You have an Israeli premier and a small circle of British stooges who are carrying the name of Israel against the objections of traditional leaders of Israel. The leading traditional leaders of Israel up to this point have all opposed this kind of operation, including against, you know, Iran and so forth. They're against it.
What's going to happen if Iran gets attacked?
Well, if Iran gets attacked, that's intended by the British to be the trigger used to launch the war. It depends on the point at which the British are able to get a secure control over ordering, through the President of the United States, ordering the launching of World War III as a thermonuclear war concentrated in Asia, but not limited to Asia.
Well, I've noticed they've moved the force to Asia, the naval and nuke forces, but the Russians and people are starting to concentrate in the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf and Syria. I guess they're thinking China's going to come in to back up Iran.
No, it's different. It's a whole package. The whole Asia-centered package is one package of nations. Russia, China, India, and other leading nations, Japan, Korea, and so forth, who want no part of this policy.
No, I understand. They're not going along. I mean, I know they're moving the fleets and the troops there and Australia, but what I'm saying is I see a lot of conflict in the Middle East, too. How does that kick off stuff in Asia? What's their excuse?
All that Middle East case, that problem now, all comes from Britain, number one, and it comes from our presidency, the Obama presidency. That's the cause of all the Middle East problems right now.
All right, I want to ask you when we come back and then take a few calls, how are they planning on starting a war with the communist Chinese then? We'll be right back. I will get to some of the calls there. I want to talk to Mr. LaRouche, folks like Dan and Teeny and others, and I'll try to get to everybody else that's there. But I was thinking about the psychology, say, of Don Corzine, Obama's big financial advisor, stealing $1.2 billion. Now they've announced they're going to keep it because he lost a 40-to-1 bet. The hubris level, the chutzpah level, the bravado level, whatever you want to call it, the megalomania level, I don't ever get people that just think they're 100% bulletproof. Maybe when I was 14 years old. But I just don't get these guys that have all this power. I mean, I've got a little bit of power with millions of listeners, and it kind of is a big responsibility, freaks me out. I try to be more careful about what I say because, you know, I realize that, that it affects things. But there's this opposite where you have all these madmen running things who make 40-to-1 bets, and I don't know how they think they're going to make it through a big nuclear war. They're just crazy.
Well, the Corzine case, as I know it, would give you the answer to that. Corzine is not a thief. He's not a bad person. But he came up as a person seeking or impulse for a career. He took the career he had available to him, and what he did as a banker was what was accepted in that time, and is accepted generally.
I know, that's what I mean. It's reckless to make 40-to-1 bets with other people's money.
Of course it is, but the point is, that's the system now. And you can't blame the individual, the whole system is there. Look at your entire Congress.
I'm saying this is a crazy system with nuclear weapons. These people are crazy.
Of course, but think about the repeal of Glass-Steagall that occurred. All the worst damage that has been done to the United States and its people was the revoking of Glass-Steagall in the last phase of that process. And the repeal of Glass-Steagall opened the gates for all the hell which has burst out since that time. So you have to blame the people who orchestrated that and the people who defended the key bankers that were doing it. All of this came from London. But people weren't thinking about loyalty or anything else. They were thinking about money.
Sure, but that's my point, is they knew when they opened up the derivatives casino, fractional reserve banking to the moon, that it would cause a global implosion. What I'm saying is they are trying to ride this target, this bomb down to the target, like Dr. Strangelove.
In some cases, yes, the leading ones, the British ones, and the key people in Wall Street, the top people, Wall Street, the real Wall Street, Morgan, and that interest. They've been thieving, and people have loved them in Maine. Not loved them in the sense of physically loving them, but admiring them for their achievement and wishing that they could have the same thing. Our morality has been destroyed by the destruction of our characteristic American initiative, which is not a money issue. We're not monetarists, not honest Americans. We believe in a credit system. Our system was based on a credit system. And all this stuff is a violation of the credit system. The main thing we have to think about is the cure of this problem, rather than the complaint against it. My point is, we are in a situation of crisis where I believe that if more people would respond, we could, first of all of these Republican candidates for president, a joke, worse than a joke. Obama, an abomination. Then why are these abominations listed as the probable presidential candidates? That's where our problem lies.
Lyndon, we've got to go to break. Will you come back and take a couple more calls with us?
Sure.
Or a couple of calls? Great. And I do want to ask you, because I understand you disagree with some folks on solutions, if you're specifically talking about Ron Paul, because he's against the war, and he certainly is a man of principle, and he's predicted everything that's happening as well. We'll be right back. You're saying all the candidates are a joke. The other Republican candidates are pure establishment hacks who put out rhetoric but are bought and paid for. Look at Mitt Romney. I agree with you. But, you know, I know some people have attacked Ron Paul saying, well, if you cut everything, everything will implode. And I understand that some of the banksters want to cut things once they've gotten their bankster welfare. My whole point is that it's the big banks that are getting the corporate welfare to begin with, and that's who Ron Paul says he'll cut it from. He also says he'll end all these wars and bring the troops home immediately. Briefly, what's your view of Ron Paul?
Well, Ron Paul I'm dealing with the real issue before me. The real issue is the United States cannot be saved from its own folly unless we immediately enact Glass-Steagall now, not down in the future, now, because we're on the point of the actual breakdown crisis of the entire United States economy. And if we do not get that Glass-Steagall renewal enacted now, this nation is finished. economically.
Well, we can certainly see the depressions here. They've been telling us it's a great economy, but they admit that the numbers they're putting out are fake. And
the problem is a presidential candidate who does not propose an immediate Glass-Steagall enactment is not fit to be a presidential candidate, because the United States will cease to exist unless that change is made. That's not sufficient, but it's necessary. Without the Glass-Steagall Act, you cannot save this nation now. And if you're not pushing the Glass-Steagall Act now, you're not fit to be president. And the second thing, this will not be sufficient. Our intrinsic banking system now, even the non-speculative type, is so rotted out and so weakened, we do not have the adequate amount of credit needed to be organized to save this nation. Therefore, we need to make a change in the actual banking system to go to a true credit system, which was the original policy with the U.S. Constitution. If we go to a credit system, take one project, for example, take NWAPA. NWAPA will employ 4 million people, and it will start to do that the minute you start the project. The project is fully designed in principle. There's some details that would have to be worked out, but as designed by the company initially, back there in the 1960s. That policy, there are other policies, other programs similarly. We could restore this nation at an accelerating rate rapidly if we pass 2 laws. One, Glass-Steagall. That cleans up the banking system. Number 2, the saved banking system will not be sufficient to save the nation. If you try to maintain a typical monetary system, you cannot save the United States. It may not die right away, but it won't recover. If we go to a credit system as well as a Glass-Steagall reform, we will immediately be able, with the cooperation of other nations which are going to induce to join with us in this, we can start a recovery of the United States, of a United States style recovery.
Lyndon, let me ask you this now. Can you do one more 10-minute segment with us?
Sure.
So we can finish up and take a few calls from people that are holding, and then after Lyndon leaves us, I'll get to the others that have been holding for a while, like Mark and others. But we're going to go to break here in a moment. But briefly, how do they plan on starting a war in Asia?
The plan is as follows. The Israelis were to start the war. The Israelis are supposed to start a provocation against Iran. In the meantime, in the middle of Asia, East Asia, or West Asia, you have Syria. Now, Syria is the most important nation in West Asia. It represents not the most capable military force in terms of quality of military force. I'm not talking about the extent of weapons and so on, but the quality of the troops. It also is tied to emotional...
Tell you what, start over when we come back quickly, because I want to go over all this in one piece, and then we'll take a few calls with Lyndon LaRouche. But we're looking at your view of the grand chessboard. But strategically, right there, it is at a key spot to control that whole area and the Mediterranean, the Russians' only Mediterranean port. The whole world is steaming towards a giant conflict. We'll continue back live on the other side with your phone calls and Lyndon LaRouche. LaRouchePack.com.